Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of A Bit of This and a Bit of That. My name is Yulyah Baharani, and in this episode, we are going to continue the talk on mental illness and mental health. Before I start, I want to inform you guys that this part of the talk mainly revolves around suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempt. So it might be a trigger to some people. And I want to say that if you are listening and are bothered or triggered by it, you should find someone to talk to. And you can text me anytime. You can talk to me. You can find ways to reach out to me on the description of this podcast. And please know that my Instagram direct message is always open. And you can send me an email or text me via my Tumblr account, just anywhere. I will be there for you, I promise. And I want you to remember that you are never alone in your struggle and that you deserve better. You may not see it now, but I promise you that you deserve better and things will be better. Things will be better if you just stick around and have faith, have hope. Don't you ever forget that. Actually, I initially planned to just touch about this part of my struggle very briefly because it is such a heavy subject and I am not an expert. I'm not well equipped with enough sources and knowledge to talk a lot, to give, a lot of lesson and values, but then I realized that I couldn't possibly talk about my mental illness problem and, talk about mental health issues in general while skipping one of the most important parts. And perhaps in my case, the part where the turning point happens in my journey of dealing with mental health. I think I don't want to cry. I think that is the main reason I initially didn't want to talk a lot about this because I am a lot tougher now, a lot stronger emotionally. I can calmly talk about my past mental health journey and, you know, be okay with that talk. But this particular part, the suicidal part, the suicide attempt, it is still an extremely difficult topic for me to bring up, to, calmly bring up. Actually, even when preparing some outlines to do this talk, I had to stop several times because I began crying and I was not even speaking then. I was simply reminiscing. And I obviously don't want my listeners to not be able to hear what I say in, the actual recording because of the sound of snot and tears. But anyway, let's do this talk and I promise I will try my best. And again, please remember that this is a very personal story and personal understanding I have gathered throughout my journey. I'm just going to tell it as it is, but my main focus is not how I attempted suicide, but rather what I learned from the experience and from my overall struggle with suicidal thoughts and my previous attempt. And I hope in sharing my story, I hope it will provide some insights and I don't know, maybe some people will relate to it and my sharing will be helpful or useful in some ways. I do hope so. Well, where should I start? I have talked in the previous part how I struggled with mental illness and the effect it had on me in my life. Anyway, if you haven't listened to that part yet, you probably should. Anyway, after going through so much, the things I have explained in the first part of this talk, you know, to have my goals, my plans, my dreams, my relationship with people, my health, my economic situation, just every single part of my being, my very existence, to have all those shattered. I i just became helpless. I don't know. I had to witness my life crash to ruins right in front of my eyes, and not being able to do anything about it. It was really damaging. At the time, I felt the days felt too slow, and at the same time, it felt too fast, it moves too fast, and I hated both impressions. I became hopeless, and I began to see that not leaving and not existing might be the best option for myself and for everyone else. At the time, that was the thought inside my head. Um, I don't know. I guess, let's talk about what being suicidal really like. Um, I don't know actually. Um, at first, as I explained in the first part, because talking about being suicidal, we talk about the risk factor. What really brings us to that state of emotion where we consider suicide as the best option for ourselves and for those around us. And in my case, my illness was the main risk factor, and that risk factor, it branched out to the many effects caused by my illness. So what was a soul the one risk factor, it became so many, it branched out to so many. So the risk factor was not only one anymore. It was there were a lot of risk factor. And at the time, I remember feeling lonely. I felt lonely. I felt to be no more than a burden for my family. um I felt awful thinking about, you know how my family finance must have taken a blow, because years of treatment was not cheap, and my parents paid more than half of the portion of my expense. I felt like I was taking what's supposed to be the rights of my siblings, even down to my parents' consent, because at the time their concern was mainly for me. Um, I was overwhelmed with shame and guilt and all kind of emotion, sadness, anger, frustration, and then numbness. I was growing tired of hospital and of medications. I was tired of being sick. I simply was tired of living at the time. And actually, I had done self-harm at the time on multiple occasions, but I always thought that self-harm, or was just one thing that comes with my illness, and I was prescribed medications to deal with exactly that. And you know I didn't think more about that, like the danger of that or what it might mean at the time. And actually, I confided to my psychiatrist, but I can't recall, that she's ever elaborated on that part of my story. I knew we talked about that, but I don't know. There's even a few sessions where I felt judged. Maybe it's only my distorted perception of things, but yeah, I can't really recall being comforted or, being shown ways to really deal with that. Anyway, as I began to frequently think about death, sometimes hoping for death, I knew at that time that I had to ask for help. I knew I had recognized the danger at the time. So I seek out for help from my friends. I tried to reach out, but I don't know, at the time nobody seemed to notice. And actually, it didn't make me feel unloved at the time. It simply felt to me that, oh, so others are busy with their own life to worry about my problem. But it's not bitterness I felt, it's more like I had given up from any possibility of getting help from them. So I just stopped speaking about my feeling. I was all smiles as usual. I still laughed from the belly when I hung out with them, with my friends. And I didn't realize at that time that putting a strong cover, a strong facade in front of my illness, and let my feelings all piled up inside, that it was actually a highway to destruction. I didn't realize that. And I also actually did ask for help from people in the university, but their reaction, I don't know, it only made it worse for me in some ways. I remember one day um, I had to go to the academic office to explain something, to explain my situations. Um, and oh God, I still remember this. So I met this someone, and after explaining my problem, my situation to a couple of people actually in the academic office, but what this person said to me really stuck in my head, and I still remember this word to word. Anyway, he said, and this is the literal translation because he said it in Bahasa Indonesia. He said to me, "Well, it shouldn't be a problem. It's not like the sky collapsed on you." Not exactly that tone, but exactly that words, word to word. And I remember being speechless hearing that he presumed I shouldn't complain about anything. Everything should be alright because it's not like the sky collapsed on me. I don't know. Oh, what did I feel at the time? I remember being so disappointed and so sad. And I was overwhelmed with confusion. I didn't understand why is this adult who's already past middle age, who's supposed to be smart and wise because he occupies a position for, those with cleverness and wisdom, why is he dismissing my struggle like it's nothing? You know, I some days I can't even open my eyes and he's saying it like I'm telling him some cheap excuses. I remember dragging my feet out of that office and sat numbly on the floor. I just, oh God. After sitting down for a few minutes, I saw someone I knew passing by, and he actually stopped by because he might he probably recognized the look at my face. I wasn't alright, and when he approached me, I just cried wordlessly to him. And he's not really a close friend actually. We didn't hang out together, and he's not even in many of my classes, but we talked. And at the time, I didn't think much about that. I was just so sad and so overwhelmed that tears simply came out without warning. And that friend was kind enough. He was actually so kind to accompany me for, I don't know, I think almost half an hour. I think until I completely calmed down. And it was such a traumatizing experience for me. There were actually other moments as well with, many other people that really left me disappointed in the past. But I don't know. I think um, I am in a point in my life where I can accept that everything is in the past now, and I even though there's still this part of myself that still question why did you know they do as they did in the past. But I don't know, I guess I just i just try to talk myself into thinking that they probably didn't mean bad. And you know actually, I like to think that I am at a point in my life where I can genuinely think and believe that those people did not mean bad. They just did not know better. And after all, mental health is not exactly a topic people talk over tea in here. So yeah, they it was simply a case of ignorance. And it's comforting for me thinking that it was simply a case of ignorance. But at that time, you know, it really not having the kind of environment that is accommodating, that is embracing me, it was really a huge part in my getting worse. Because, with all the risk factors that are already pre-existing in me with my illness and stuff, and then on top of that, not getting the help I was so desperately needed, it's a given that I began to really fancy death. And at the time, an intentional death seemed to me not so much of an appalling thing anymore. I began to consider it. The first memory of my suicidal ideation, I I remember spending hours in my room. I did an analysis on the pros and cons of each method to suicide, like whether I should just slit my hands or slit my throats and die from losing too much blood. But it is too gory for my liking, kind of like a scene from Tarantino movies. Or I remember thinking whether hanging is better because no blood um would be involved, but then it involves extra work to purchase and hang the material. Or the simplest of them all, I should just overdose. I actually hate myself for talking while laughing at this moment. I hate my own laugh because I don't know. I'm trying so much to not being too emotional, so excuse the laughing. I'm not really laughing, but laughing is better than crying or being too emotional. Anyway, um at that night, I was doing all that contemplation. And I remember vividly doing it, but I was not myself at the time. It sort of just happened beyond my awareness. And after some time, I just suddenly realized what I was doing. And the point where I realized I'm seriously doing an analysis of what is the best method to do suicide. The moment I realized that, I felt an emotion I to this day I still don't know what to name it. I was stunned. I remember immediately went out of my room. I walked out to the area where I lived when I first left home for university. I was I was really I was desperate to find a familiar scene or environment or a soothing place for me. So I went to that place um, near my first boarding house in university. It's around 3 kilometers from um, my place at the time, and I went to this coffee shop, my favorite coffee shop, and placed my order. And I sat in a secluded corner in the smoking area, and I remember no customers at that time. I still remember taking a long breath and said out loud to myself, "What the actual F are you doing, Bito?" I remember repeating that sentence over and over again. Anyway, Bito is a nickname from my family, and I address myself in that name only at special times, the good and the bad kind of special. And that day was quite special, one of the worst kind of special. I guess at the time, I was surprised to realize just how messed up I was. I couldn't believe that I had gone there or my head had gone there. But at the time, I thought it was only a fleeting thought. I was just being silly and I refused to acknowledge that moment. It was only in my head for that little time. Or so I had thought, because obviously it didn't. One day I was back to seriously thinking about suicide, but the thoughts were always in the back of my head, and it's easy to dismiss when it's only in your head. But then one night I voiced it out for the very first time. I admitted out loud that I indeed was considering suicide. A few days after that night, I was on the roof in my campus library. God, I still remember this day very vividly. I climbed 3 floors up to the rooftop, and I was so ready to jump down. I spent more than an hour on the roof trying to weigh down the consequences of what I was about to do, thinking of so many things and not thinking about anything at the same time. And suddenly, in those moments of contemplation, of weighing down the consequences, the faces of my parents flashed by, and I was immediately overwhelmed. I ditched that plan at that day. But even though I didn't carry out my plan, the impact of realizing what I had planned to do was very huge and disturbing. I sat on that floor for another hour, trying to calm myself. And at la- my final decision was to take a picture of the sky. And after taking the picture, I descended to the ground. I still keep the picture I took in that moment. I realized I don't want to die yet, by the way. I posted it on my Instagram account as a reminder. Uh, anyway, after that day, I was overwhelmed with thoughts I couldn't understand. I was so desperate to stay alive, and at the same time, I was so ready to go. I was so ready to let go of everything. And I was so scared of myself. I was scared with my knowledge of various ways to end life. I was scared with this crooked bravery to end everything. I didn't want others to find me and talk to me, but at the same time, I was desperate for someone to ask me what happened. Are you okay? I was beyond confused. So I decided to go on a little adventure. I needed the finances. So I got rid of my phone. I ditched my rented room. I brought with me only my laptop, my wallet, and three pieces of clothing. Basically, I went missing. It became a huge thing that everyone at campus, not only in my faculty, but the whole campus, everyone at home, and everyone who knew me, they launched a search mission. And I had not planned another attempt at the time, actually. I was happy with what I found on the road. Um, I was, I felt like I obtained something. There's some of my questions were finally getting some answers. So I was happy, but um, in that state of mind with um a little bit of happiness, I think my emotion was happiness was quite dominant in my emotion in my state of mind at the time. So I went back to campus. Um, I was ready to meet people at the time because I've got this reassurance that life was indeed beautiful. And um, when I went back, my older brother and two friends they found me. Their name are Andini and Kalisna, by the way, and I will forever cherish my friendship with them and cherish that moment they found me and um asked asked me to come back. Actually, to this day, I still haven't seen that poster announcing my missing because I don't know. I don't regret my decision because I really needed it at the time. I really needed to do that. But I also don't want to be reminded of that moment. The thought of making that many people, especially my close ones, worrying for me, it doesn't feel good. After that moment, my father visited me to cheer me up. He brought me shopping, he treated me my favorite cakes, he tried to talk with me about what happened. But even then, I couldn't heal yet. I started taking my medication again, getting back to feeling like zombie every day. Uh, but even then, afterwards, after everything I tried to become better, things still didn't get better. Actually, I became even more bitter and hopeless and numb at the time. I went so far to wishing that I had no family, so I could just die without anyone bearing the consequences. I became really worse that I came to a point where I was resolute to commit suicide. I kept a journal and I still have the journal with me. Um I journal about what method, what I felt each day, and then um why I should probably just do suicide, and with what method and what time precisely I plan to do it. At the time, I had settled for overdose. In my head at the time, I I sort of talked to myself that I have my very little medications with me, and overdosing with this will be a sure death, and there won't be a lot of mess. And if I am lucky, my death even, it may seem normal to be ruled as a normal death, especially with everyone knowing how sick I have been all this time. I was so ready to meet the catastrophic ending of my life. So one night I tidied up my room to because I figured people will come looking for me and they would come to my room, so I had to make it decent enough when people came in. I ordered a very nice meal for my dinner, my last dinner. Actually, I remember I had wanted to go outside and see the sky. The sky was so beautiful that night, and I'm not saying it for aesthetic or sentimental purpose, romanticizing this experience. It was really a beautiful, bright night. By the time I decided not to go out, because I knew seeing something beautiful would waken me, it would weaken my resolution, so I stayed in my room. I left the door open and I opted to read instead. I chose to read Into the Wild at the time. It was my one of my favorite books. But I don't. After only a few pages, I didn't understand why, but I again felt an unfamiliar emotion that unsettled me. So I just closed the book and I decided to just idly wait until past midnight when I had planned to do it, to do my suicide. Oh god, I feel nauseous as I'm recalling that experience. Uh, anyway, came midnight. I was ready. I took those tablets of medicine and I swallowed them at once. By the time I swallowed everything, times times felt like it moved very slowly, like some kind of slow motion scene in a film, and I still can't quite describe my feeling at that moment. It was a very funny emotion. Everything flashed by in front of me, my whole life, all the people, all the moments. And there's this funny feeling in the back of my head. I was not so sure anymore of dying. Um, anyway, I still don't know why or how I was high and delirious, but in that moment of post swallowing so many tablets, I somehow got out of my room, went to the street, and I was I was not conscious, probably half conscious already then. And I threw up in front of a building and I just passed out. And I found myself awake in the emergency room and uh, only after I met the people, the security officer who saved me that day, that I knew, according to them, I had convulsion and I had a very violent seizure. Then I threw up all the contents of my stomach. Then I just passed out, out cold like a log in the street, and they brought me to the hospital. That image of that night of myself lying on a bed in the hospital after waking up, and that thought of ending everything, even to this day, it often suddenly flashes before me and I will shudder. Oh, that that moment really, it still makes me nauseous even to this moment. I can't bear the possibility of my loved ones suffering because of me. And God, I don't want to think about what will happen to those people I love had I didn't survive that attempt. I still don't know what my landlady told my parents about what happened that night, and I don't want to know. What I know is I was hospitalized, I came out alive, and that is where I want to focus my energy at. You know, I have always believed in miracle. Miracle is this one little idea of romanticizing life, and it is only an idea until you witness it for real or you become a subject of its scheme. What happened to me was absolutely a miracle, and I thank God. I thank God for a second chance in life. I thank God. I thank God that I survived that attempt, that that I didn't have to put my loved ones into a position of overwhelming confusion. And and that moment that convinced me of one thing. There must be a reason for my existence in this huge world. There must be one, and I am committed. I want to go all the way to say it folded out. No matter how hard the road, how bumpy. I want to go to the very end of it. After that night, I often thought of what was it that held me back from radically giving up, because I frequently wanted to just give up. I often thought of what was it that made me fear for my life when I finally did my attempt, and what made me so relieved and grateful when I survived my attempt, I didn't have much space in my head and my mind at the time to think rationally. But even when I wasn't equipped with rational thoughts, the thought of my parents, they somehow was always, I don't know, my parents were always able to make it there, to make it in my head, in my mind. I would be reminded of their faces, their smiles. I would be reminded of home, of my childhood with them, and even at that point where I felt little to no hope. Even at that point, I knew one thing for sure. I was not ready to imagine what losing me would do to my parents, especially my father. My mom would be devastated. We are extremely close, and she is an amazing, loving mother, but she is strong. But my father, my dad, losing me in such a sad and confusing way would definitely kill him. I am his best friend. And I just couldn't do that to him. I just couldn't put him into that place, that position in life, to make him losing his best friend and his beloved daughter in such way that provide no closure. I just couldn't do that to him, and to my mom as well. I remember one day, months after my attempt, I think, and I came home to rest. The three of us, I, my mom, and my dad, we took a drive, and we came to a stop at a mosque by the sea for afternoon prayer. Um, I finished first, so I kind of just wandered around the perimeter. And by the time I came back to the parking lot, my father was pale, and with kind of a little joking tone, he said to me that he was so afraid when I didn't appear for several minutes. He thought to himself, what if I had thrown my body into the sea? I knew it was a forced joke. My father feared exactly that. And it made me realize just to what extent my dad understood what's going on inside my mind and how scared he was for that. If there is one thing about suicide that helped me to see reasons, it is the collateral damage of suicide. I cannot bear the guilt to have caused that to my loved ones and to be the only selfish person that doesn't have to deal with the consequence. After my past experience, that experience and those periods of constant suicidal thoughts, I forced myself to toughen up, to be straightforward, to be blunt, to be harsh to myself, to say it as it is, that suicide is the most selfish of all forms of selfishness. And I actually knew that. Actually, even when I always knew that, but when we're struggling, our perception of reality is too distorted to be able to see that. When talking about suicide, there's the talk on the individual level, and then there's the talk on societal level. Mental health, and particularly suicide, it is a difficult matter, and for a successful effort to prevent it, there has to be a collective effort from the individual themselves and the society as well, the society as a whole. Suicide is not a product of impulsive thought, it is countless hours of contemplation. It's a long and tiring inner fight. Suicide begins as a thought, then it becomes plan, then the plan turns into action. So when you start to have the thought, you should seek help immediately. Your thoughts should stop at that, at being a thought, just a thought. It does not have to turn into an action, and in fact, it should not and must not turn into an action. The stigma, the misconceptions, it prevents people to reach out for help. Especially in my case, I live in Indonesia where conversation on mental health is almost non existent. It's very rare and far from being inclusive. In here, even your loved ones with the best of intention are bound by the misconception. So, I was not comfortable with sharing my darkest, deepest thoughts to my family and close friends until things got to the extreme end. I had no choice but to be open about that. So I'm sharing my story right now. Um, I allow myself to be vulnerable, to be truthful about one of the most difficult period of my life, with the only hope to be part in the conversation, to be a part in an opening the conversation, to help get rid of the stigma and misconception, to to tell those who might be suffering right now that they are not alone and that helps are available and that things can get better and things will be better. You know, hope hope is a very funny word. It's difficult to grasp until it's the only thing you hold on to. I remember a short story by Indonesian author Muhammad Diponegoro. I forget what this story called, but it's about a man who tried to kill himself by jumping off from a hill. Um, he his life had gone to the worst, so he thought there's no way he could make it better. Escaping it through death, through suicide, was the best thing he could do to himself and to his family. But then, when he's about to do it, a tiger attacked him, and when he was attacked by the tiger, he found himself fighting for his life, realizing that no matter how crappy and tiring life is, it is still better. Life is worth it to live for. It's a profoundly provoking but beautiful story, and I think that is what happens to suicidal people in their suicide attempt. Some people just don't linger long enough to finally see reasons. And I really hope everyone who's struggling give themselves a long enough time to finally realize that they deserve better and that everything will be better. Anyway, let's talk about what we can do when we find ourselves in the darkest place. Um I will talk more about my profound shift of perception on my emotional struggle on the later part of the talk. But for now, I want to share a few simple things that I find helpful to cope with suicidal ideation. Um, so, what should we do? And I'm talking from my personal experience. First, find, what I found really helpful when I was struggling is having a routine. So, first, have a routine. Keeping a routine will be really, really helpful. And then keep a note. Write every single reason why life is worth to live. Do breathing exercise. You can find about this in many sources on internet. In personally, in my case, my therapist taught me that. Um, Distract yourself with activities that make you feel good. Force yourself to not think too far ahead into the future. And sometimes thinking too far ahead into the future, you know, cannot be avoidable. You somehow just find yourself in that place where you can't help but think too much. And every time you start to think a lot about that, just distract yourself. Personally, in my case, I used to read poem or listen to songs. I used to listen to Eminem when I felt that way. And, you know, just be proactive to find something, just anything that gives you comfort. Um, I also want to encourage people, to encourage everyone who might be suffering, to talk to people. Please talk to people. If you're comfortable enough, wear your emotion on your sleeve. Just be open, be openly vulnerable. You know, when suffering from mental health issues and suicidal ideation, at first you think people should leave you alone because even if they won't talk, there are no right words anyway. But at the same time, deep down, you're pleading to be seen, to be felt. And from my experience, I have proved that I have proven that the initial fear is nothing but a baseless fear made by our own very distorted perception. Because in truth, we need people, we need other people. Sure, there is no right word. I mean, what can you say to someone suffering so much that they consider suicide? But you don't really need to hear the right words. We don't need that. We simply need words, any word at all. As simple as that. We don't need more. We just simple sentences like, "What can I help?" or "Are you alright?" Just anything at all. Even a stranger's smile and a stranger's kind words are enormously helpful. At least in my case, I felt that way, and I want to believe that is the same for others. After all, we're all the same human being. Um, I also want to. This is a very important part, I believe. We really need to acknowledge that a meaningful life is never meant to be a walk in the park. We need we need to acknowledge that it's hard to be young, it's hard to be an adult, it's hard to live, but that is life. Life will always be ups and downs, so just ride the wave. Just ride the wave. And if your downs are caused by something more profound, more complicated, like in my case with my illness, seek help. And talking from experience, um, some professionals that that are in the position that they could help us. Um, Not anyone could help us the same. Some, at least I'm speaking from personal experience. I changed therapist a few times because some I felt, at least to me personally, um, they they're quite dissatisfactory. But anyway, my point is find someone you can be comfortable with. Find someone that who, although they are professional as they should be, you know that they genuinely want to help you and are able to help you as one human being to another human being, aside from being a professional to their passion. And then, on a more profound sense of understanding, and this is a very important part, and I will elaborate on this on the next part of the talk. I want to encourage you and us all to find more reason other than our own self to stay living. In my case, it is God, it is my faith, my parents, my siblings, my family, my friends, my love of sports, of tennis, my ongoing favorite TV shows, the soon to be released films I am excited to see, the music and the poems that still able to make me feel emotion, the K-pop artist whose works I enjoy, and many more things. Sometimes even when I lost access to myself, to my own mind, being reminded of those things I love, those of the people that loves me, it gave me a very strong sense of I don't know, of belonging, I guess, and the strength to try for my survival. And the things I mentioned in the end of my previous sentences probably sound silly to some people. Probably sound trivial, like music, films, artists, and stuff. But believe me when I say those little things do help. Maybe not in a profound way, maybe only for momentary joy, but if it helps you to take away your mind from the darkness for 1 minute or two, then it's worth to keep. Keep it. Hold on tight to it. That 1 and 2 minutes will manifest in a huge way to save your life. You know, as I previously said on the first part of the talk, life with mental illness is weird. The pattern is hard to notice because you are okay and somehow you are not okay the next day. Sometimes the change happens so quickly in the matter of hours. Sometimes, you know, okay and not okay both are part of yourself at the same time. And this is where small matters and random joy have roles. Imagine a heavy rain with storm and dark sky, but then there's the rainbow after it. The storm is frightening, but the rainbow afterwards is so beautiful that it's worth staying to meet another rainbow. That's the way I decided to see things. Find reason to stay. And don't forget, simple joy is easier to find than a rainbow, so sticking around shouldn't be too dreadful. You just have to find a reason to stay alive with the hope of seeing a more beautiful day by the end of a very hard day. I am sometimes asked about that moment when I was suicidal. Some people are treading carefully, some people are quite blunt with their questions, some have motives, some are simply out of curiosity. I used to dismiss the questions in the beginning. To some people, I was even defensive. But now I have gained a fair perspective to see the part of my life, that particular part of my life. Um, and I am able to talk about it without the need to be defensive or shameful. I had come to a place where I can accept that part of my life, that part of myself, that part of my existence. So, I was suicidal and I am no longer feeling that way now. My life is far from being the kind of life I pictured when I was a 17 years old high school graduate with the world in her head and the sky as her limit. I am still building it back from the ruins, but I am alive and I am doing it. I am living my life, and that's all it takes to build my life back, one step at a time. I am not shameful of it, but of course not proud of it either. The only emotion I feel now, as I think of those moments and those periods in my life is gratitude. Only gratitude. Gratitude towards God that I survived my attempt and that it allows a radical shift in my life and my struggle. Because only after the shock brought by my attempt to suicide, then I was able to be openly vulnerable. My family and very close friends finally able to understand my situation little by little. And only then was I able to start my real journey to healing. My journey to healing is the topic for the third part of our mental health talk. So please wait for it. It's coming up soon. But for now, I thank you for listening to this episode, to this part of the talk, and I hope you can take something valuable, something insightful, something meaningful, something useful from the experience and the thoughts I share. And we will continue to talk on the next episode. But one last thing to close this episode. I heard this beautiful Latin phrase once, dum spiro spero, when there is life, there is hope. And I really believe in that. So, to you, to everyone who's listening to this podcast right now, and to everyone really who might be suffering at the moment, I hope that phrase dum spiro spero, I hope you hold on to that. I hope you hold on to that, to hope, to knowing that your life is precious, that you are precious, that you can fight back, that everything will be better. I hope you know that and that you hold on to that because you deserve it. You deserve to live to see everything getting better. You deserve to be hopeful. It's been a very meaningful talk to me, to be so vulnerable, to share my story. And I want to say to everyone who's struggling right now that I love you. And I repeat, you are never alone.
in your struggle. Reach out for help. Reach out to me. I will be there, I promise. Anyway, bye, and until the next episode, thank you for listening.